The following is a presentation of KSL Sports.
First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Subscribe to the First and 12 podcast. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio.
Hey everybody, welcome on in. It's your Football Tuesday right here on KSL News Radio. Alex Kirry, Mitch Harper. It is First and 12. Thanks for being on the program here with Mitch Harper. What's up, man? We get to jam, of course, during the week. Typically during this program, we'll see each other on the weekend sometimes, depending on where we're at covering games on the weekend. And we saw each other this weekend at the BYU game. We've got that to talk about. We've got all sorts of things to jump into here on the program. First of all, I want to say congratulations, all right?
Why is that?
You said Cincinnati was going to win this freaking football game against Iowa State last week.
I was riding the Satterfield train first time.
Now that we were not doing. What we were doing was maybe the Brendan Sorsby train.
Yes.
And that's maybe probably where we should start things off here is talking about the biggest game of the week in the conference last week, which was Iowa State falling to Cincinnati. But more importantly, look, the Big 12 will beat itself up. We know this. We'll see this throughout the rest of the year, right? We're going to see teams beating each other up throughout the rest of the year. But Cincinnati has emerged as something that feels a lot like BYU was last year. I don't know if I'm quite ready to say that it feels like, or maybe Colorado. Doesn't feel like the Arizona State situation, obviously.
That's a great comparison. I like that you went that direction.
Give me a second or third place in Big 12 kind of conversation over. But because of where they were last year and because of where the conversations have gone with Coach Scott Satterfield, which is every time that guy came around at media day, we all kind of looked the other direction like, oh, boy, this guy, he wants to chat with us. And both Utah and Cincinnati are playing, or both Utah and BYU here in this market are playing Cincinnati. That should scare the death out of every team that had looked at Cincinnati prior, Mitch Harper, and had said, I think Cincinnati might be a nice little notch that one down for a W. How about going to Nippert Stadium now? If you're Iowa State and you went in there and you're down 31-7, I have not seen an Iowa State Matt Campbell team look so disorganized and so out of sorts than they did against this Cincinnati team. And I'm not sure what to think about Iowa State at this point. I'm almost certain that I know more about Cincinnati than I do about Iowa State.
Yeah, Cincinnati is flying high. First time they've got a 3-game win streak in the Scott Satterfield era, so they've actually got some momentum for once. And it's crazy, too, when you think about how Cincinnati, who would have thought that Scott Satterfield might have more job security than Luke Fickell, who left Cincinnati. And I thought that was so crazy at the time because I really believed had Luke Fickell stayed at Cincinnati, they could have become one of the powers in the Big 12, personally. But Satterfield, it took time, but he's got them rolling now. And getting this win over Iowa State 38-30 was by far the biggest win for Cincinnati and a breakthrough moment for the program. But you brought up Brendan Sorsby. He is so good. He is a dual-threat quarterback, 214 passing yards, 64 yards on the ground. You know, this team's not going to be glamorous. They're not going to probably get much national attention. I think that's not fair because, honestly, it's a little bit of the case of the Arizona State thing last year where because of such low preseason expectations, Cincinnati is not entering the conversation in the rankings. But the last 2 weeks, they have been so good. They had more than 600 yards in that win over Kansas. Cincinnati's offense has put up more than 1,000 yards these past 2 weeks. They are flying high, and they deserve to be a nationally ranked team. I can't believe that they're not.
I was shocked.
They're so good right now.
Yeah, and I was shocked. I thought the same thing. And you know, we look at the thing and go, well, they're receiving votes. You know, it's like, who cares? Like, you know, get them into the top. They should be in the poll. They should be in the poll, and the Big 12 needs teams in this in the polls, right? I mean, and we'll talk about that coming up a little bit later in the hour, but
I'm glad that Iowa State stayed in the poll. So
and I think that having one loss against a really good Cincinnati team, or at least a team that we thought, I mean, this is okay. You heard this before? They were 5-7 last year. You know, like, and then this year they're looking like world beaters. They're 4-1 already, right? And so you're looking at a team now that feels like Colorado, that feels like BYU from last year, where they were down here. The expectations weren't just low; they're also looking around, going, do you belong? How many conversations have we had with people who are like, does Cincinnati really belong in this whole thing? And like I said, now your schedule that you thought was a little bit of a piece of cake if you're some of these teams who went, hey, sign me up. I got Cincinnati on this thing. I'm also thinking about BYU specifically, who at least Utah gets Cincinnati at Rice-Eccles Stadium, but they've got to play them too. BYU has to go to Nippert Stadium the week before the end, the second to the last week of the season. That's after going through a disaster of a middle of the schedule for them that got hard suddenly because it's like, oh, we said your schedule was soft. Sorry, you're going to have to go to Lubbock. You're going to have to go to Ames. You're going to have to go to Cincinnati, which now looks like the toughest stretch. And you've got to throw in your rivalry game on top of it. So now, across the conference, what's up is down again, and I don't know what to think. Honestly, Mitch, I'm going to be perfectly honest too. This was a Big 12 problem last year. It's becoming an every conference problem across college football. Are you noticing? This is a transfer portal, NIL situation that has turned college football on its head in quick order. And we're watching it happen with teams like Texas, who you're like, I don't even know who this team is. With teams like North Carolina, who you go, I thought you guys were going to be decent. Clemson going, I don't know what's going on here. And then half of the American Conference undefeated right now. So I don't know what to think about college football right now.
Cincinnati's 4-1 right now. They're going to go to Utah on November 1st. There's still some time between that game and Salt Lake. I think they're going to be 7-1 going to
Absolutely.
Salt Lake. And then you wonder where Utah could be. That could be a massive stakes game, and who would have thought that? Utah and Cincinnati potentially on November 1st, and then BYU a little bit later in the season, November 22nd, late into the regular season. So Cincinnati's schedule sets up pretty well for them. I mean, after this Iowa State game this week, they got UCF, then at Oklahoma State, Baylor, and then at Utah. They could really become a national story, similar to that of Arizona State, who had a climb last year. And remember, too, Cincinnati, last year, we forget this, but Cincinnati actually beat the Big 12 champs last year, Arizona State, when Leavitt was
at
out.
Nippert Stadium.
Yeah,
Yes.
So Cincinnati's had some moments. It just didn't feel like it was actually building towards anything. Now it feels actually tangible. And when you look at Cincinnati's team, They got one of the best linebackers in the Big 12 in Jake Goldie. I love that guy. 12 tackles in that game against Iowa State. They got a good ground attack with Pryor, and Sorsby kind of leads it all. I mean, I think it's crazy, but I think that Sorsby might be the best quarterback in the city of Cincinnati right now. With
I don't know. Flacco
how bad the Bengals are playing.
I don't know, but they just got Flacco today. Did you see this?
Yeah, I did see that.
So maybe Flacco's back. He's going to be a Cleveland beater again.
Maybe Flacco gets the edge over Sorsby.
Flacco shows up. Yeah, it's nobody else, by the way. No, but I what's interesting about that is, and conversely, the Iowa State side of things, where you have Rocco Beck and Abu Sama. Like, these are guys. These are names. These are people that everybody looks at and goes, okay, those dudes are solid in the conference. And look, Iowa State and Matt Campbell, they're not going away because of that one loss. These losses happen in conference, unfortunately. I say unfortunately. Iowa State, shocker, they're not going to be undefeated by the end of the year. I don't know if there's going to be – Texas Tech has the best shot to being undefeated in the Big 12.
It was just shocking to see them down 31-7.
31-7.
They made it a comeback effort, but
okay, so I've got you.
That was surprising.
I've got you and I've got JJ on my show during the week, who both of you guys were like, I feel good about Cincinnati. I'm like, you guys are fools. Haven't you seen Cincinnati over the past 2 years? and instead, I get lulled to sleep by Matt Campbell's steadiness. And Iowa State, by the way, by the end of last year, had absolutely fizzled out. This same group, right? Same head coach, same quarterback, same running back group, they had fizzled out. And I think that the talent dropped off, obviously, with some guys who ended up going to the NFL, fine. But I just wonder if Iowa State has the longevity. And to take that hit already, maybe it wakes them up. I think an 11-win team, Iowa State last year, was not the team that should have been in the conference championship game. I think we knew that at the end of it, but I think we learned a lot. I think we learned a ton about the Cincinnati team. I don't know if we learned a lot about Iowa State, except for that I think that they're good and they probably just did not take Cincinnati seriously. Hopefully, everybody else will take that as a cue the rest of the season to go, Cincinnati is no freaking joke. And I'll tell you too, man, they wish they had that Nebraska game back. They are one play away from being undefeated, and they definitely would have been a top 15 team if that would have happened.
That was our 1st and 12 Big 12 game of the week. We'll take a break and we'll get to some headlines from around the conference. It's 1st and 12. Alex, Kirry, Mitch, Harper here on KSL News Radio.
Read all the stories about BYU sports no one else has heard. Go to KSLSports.com for exclusive columns by BYU insider Mitch Harper. That's KSLSports.com.
1st and 12 on this Football Tuesday here on KSL News Radio. You heard earlier Cougar Tracks every night here on KSL. And then coming up a little bit later at 9 p.m., the BYU Football Coaches Show with head coach Kalani Sitake. We'll hear from Kalani a little bit later in the show in the Big 12 Sound Roundup. But right now, we got to get to our 1st and 12 headlines.
12 headlines.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
The dozen storylines that shape this week of Big 12 football. Headline 1.
First things first, right off the bat, you saw this weekend, of course, at Texas Tech. We wondered if this one was going to be a game. Houston hosting Texas Tech, 2 undefeateds. Texas Tech shows that they are no joke. Joey McGuire and his guys are dialed up. Big win for them. They win by 3.5 touchdowns, and they are not just legit. They are showing everybody across the country, hey, we're a really, really good team. The polls reflected that. Finally put them in the top 10, Mitch.
And that's headline 2. Tech moves up to number 9, and it begs the question, is that too low for the Red Raiders? I think there's a conversation to be had that maybe they could be a top 5 team with how they've dominated their opponents in their path so far.
Just based off of who they typically put in the top 5 or top 10 during the whole first part of the season, maybe the voters should take a little bit of some medicine and say, you know what? Just throw those guys in there. We don't know what we're doing right now.
Thank you. Their preseason number 1 and number 2 teams are out of the poll right now.
Just take Texas and go, what did we do with these guys? What were we doing with these guys all season? You know what? We deserve to put – this isn't even – Texas, the Longhorns aren't even the 3rd best team in the state of Texas right now. So, yeah, I absolutely – if they're not low right now, I think they'll prove over the next few weeks that they are. Headline 3, Baylor – we were looking at this one, and I kept going, Baylor's going to win this game. Everybody's going, I think Kansas State might win. Baylor has to eke this one out at home again. They were facing the 3rd loss at McLean Stadium this season, and it would have been an absolute disaster for Dave Aranda and his guys. They avoided disaster. I don't think they're avoiding the criticism, though, down in Waco.
Headline 4, they're still holding on to some potential hope. Baylor is only 2-1 in league play. Do you think they could be a title contender after getting that win?
I guess you could make an argument and say, hey, we're playing in close games. We're getting a lot done.
That's key in the Big 12. We saw that last year with ASU.
It is, but they've lost 2 really close games as well. One of them was against Auburn. That actually wasn't even a close game. But I just don't know if I've seen enough out of Baylor. I keep waiting for Sawyer Robertson to just say, I'm the class of this entire conference. He's a very good quarterback. It just seems everybody is in any game with Baylor right now, and that's kind of bad news for Dave Aranda and his guys.
Headline 5, on the flip side, when it comes to close games, Kansas State, their season continues to fall to new lows. Wildcats are 1-4 in one-score games this year. 5-10 since 2023 under Chris Kleiman. They can't win the close ones.
Jeez, James Franklin thinks that those records are bad. I'm telling you, it has been a shock this year to see Kansas State perform at the level that they have. When that pick 6 happened, when Avery Johnson threw that pick 6, and I went, oh boy, this thing's going to flip totally. And it did. It was from that moment on that Kansas State's chances against Baylor were doomed. And it's been everybody else this year, Mitch, for Kansas State. It's almost like Avery Johnson's doing his darndest, but it was Avery Johnson who handed that thing away. And I think that everybody looks and goes, oh boy, what's this team doing now? Headline 6, how about Colorado? Another 2-touchdown lead at the very beginning of the game. They can't. Caden Salter did the same thing he did last week against BYU. He melted down. Got worse as the game went along.
He did, and TCU gets the win 35-21. Colorado has more Big 12 losses this year than they did last season. Last year, they only lost 2 conference games. This year, they've already got 3 as they're 0-3 in league play. But maybe more important for the Buffs going forward, headline 7, Coach Prime reveals after the game he has more blood clots. He gave an update today. We'll get to some of that, but it sounds like he's going to have some procedures. Hopefully, Coach Prime can stay healthy. I hate to hear that for Coach Prime. Headline 8, first time since 2000 that TCU won a game by 14 after trailing by 14 points. That again highlights the choke job by Colorado. But TCU, they're high-powered with that offensive attack that at times was a little bit staying in the mud in that Colorado game. But Josh Hoover turned it up, and he accounted for 4 touchdowns.
So they lose a close game last week at Arizona State, one that they had kind of in the bag and they really could have won. If that would have turned into a loss if they hadn't turned it around, if they hadn't figured some things out, we would have been looking like real fools because TCU was one of our dark horses to win this conference. But Sonny Dykes stays alive and gets that rebound win. They didn't just come back and get the win. Like you said, they ended up winning by a couple scores. It ended up being kind of embarrassing for Colorado. Headline 9, BYU gets a W. More importantly, their freshman quarterback, Bear Bachmeier, gets his second Big 12... third Big 12 Freshman of the Week honors of the year so far. After just a couple of conference games, this is a guy that every week keeps getting a little bit better. I know that there were some uncomfortable moments in there. He threw his first pick. He had a bad fumble. Those are freshman mistakes, but hey, they had one of the biggest outpourings from a passing standpoint that they would. And you would against the 130th ranked passing defense in the entire country, which is BYU taking advantage of what the defense gave them.
And I think that's highlights what Bear did. 351 passing yards in that game against West Virginia for a new career high for the true freshman. I just think he's getting better and better as the weeks go along, and teams will now, they can't just solely stack the box against BYU after giving this maybe proof of concept that Bear can win through the air. Headline 10, West Virginia is so limited in what feels like a season where the Mountaineers could go winless in league play in year 1 under Rich Rod.
Look, I know it was just the end of the game, but maybe you put in your 5th-string quarterback to take over because Wilkins was...
24 carries by Wilkins. They just ran him to death.
And you knew that was going to be their game plan.
Yeah.
You knew that the guy didn't have what it took to be that passing threat. And, BYU gave up a garbage touchdown at the very end, having that 3rd-string kind of defensive backfield in, and West Virginia's 2nd-string quarterback throwing it up in the air. I think that they're looking around at Rich Rod. He said it last week, and then it was even more prevalent this week. I don't have a quarterback. I got nothing going on right now. And they are not just struggling, they're head-scratching. And at this point, you kind of go, shut her down. Let's get to the offseason. Let's get to that transfer portal, because that's where everybody else seems to be going with West Virginia right now.
Headline 11, Kansas defense gets a late stop to hold on to win at UCF 27-20. Who would have thought the Kansas defense could get the job done late?
Well, and you know what? This one was dicey, right? Like Kansas, if they lose that game, then we're talking about a Lance Leipold team that we were going, we gave you too much respect a couple of weeks ago. And maybe we still have, but they got the win. UCF isn't like a world beater, but I think that the Black Knights are a lot tougher than we probably gave them credit for.
Further ahead than I thought they would be with Scott Frost, and I think that's progress for that team. And close it out, headline 12, Arizona quarterback Noah Fafita earned Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week. He threw for 5 touchdowns and a blowout win over Oklahoma State. Nice bounce-back performance after that disappointing effort in Ames a few weeks ago. Noah Fafita looks really good with Seth Dagey as the offensive coordinator.
A couple big defenders that could be missing from BYU this week, and obviously them going to Tucson, they probably have all sorts of confidence right now because he's playing as good as he was 2 years ago, and maybe he's flushed all the feelings from last year, and they've moved that thing on, and they've gotten to the point where they can play a lot better football. So those are your Big 12 headlines right there. We're going to take another break, and we'll come back. We have our Sound Roundup around the corner. You can hear from Prime. You can hear from Kalani. Kyle Whittingham, shocked to find out some news about how his team has been doing at Rice-Eccles Stadium. You want to hear that funny bit of sound, plus many more from across the conference. Our Sound Roundup is next right here. It's 1st and 12 right here on KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM at 1160 AM.
The following is a presentation of KSL Sports.
1st and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Subscribe to the 1st and 12 podcast. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio.
All right, everybody, welcome back. It's another edition of 1st and 12 right here on KSL News Radio over the airwaves. You can hear us every Tuesday right here on KSL News Radio. You can also download the podcast. Wherever podcasts are found, get your Big 12 update. Be the guy who knows or the gal who knows the most about the Big 12 around the water cooler at work. Just download the podcast wherever fine podcasts are found. Mitch, Harper, Alex, Kirry. Our producer is Gustavo. And let me see here, Mitch. We start things off. We've got a lot going on here because we got some things to listen to here. It's our sound roundup. It's of fame, of course. So let's take a listen.
Big 12 Sound Roundup.
Check 1, 2.
The best bites, cheap shots, and excuses from Saturday's postgame news conferences.
We talked about it earlier on the show, but Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, he revealed in the postgame after the loss to TCU that the blood clots that have been an issue for Coach Prime in the past, they've come back again.
I think I got more blood clots. Cat's out the bag, all right? I think I got more blood clots, man. It don't make sense. I'm hurting like crazy. I got the doctor's appointment Monday to see what time it is. So that's what's going on. I'm not getting blood to my leg. That's why my leg is throbbing. I'm sorry to get that out, but thank you for noticing.
It's scary stuff with Coach Prime, Alex.
Already lost a couple of toes with the same issue a couple of years ago, right?
And earlier today on Tuesday, he did give an update that he is going to undergo a procedure for blood clots, a 4-hour procedure. So it's real significant stuff.
Is he on the sideline this weekend? Probably not. I mean, if it was something like that, it's weird because he's shown up at times where you're like, there's no way that guy should be on the sidelines. After we find out what's going on, you're like, please, can you take a break for a minute?
He said he's not going to miss practice on Wednesday, so we shall see. But hopefully, Coach Prime, speedy recovery, and hopefully this gets cleared up soon. But you just wonder long term, with all this health scares that he's gone through, you just wonder what happens. Like, does he just say, you know what? I need to take a break away, but he's really committed to this team, it seems like.
Well, it's crazy, too, because if he's not around, where's Colorado? You know what I mean? Like, if he's not,
great point.
He's like, what are you going to do? Hang your hat on Warren Sapp? Like,
kicking over the pylon?
Doing his,
when he did that in the BYU game, I thought, did he really just kick over the pylon? But apparently it's a thing.
It's his thing. Yeah, and so I don't. Anyway, I don't think you see the leadership from anybody else at that group. They've, to their credit, they're doing what I think Bill Belichick is trying to do and is not accomplishing, which now that you look at it and you're like, if Bill Belichick can't pull it off, Prime has been able to assemble a bunch of like his buddies and people who, have a lot of skill, a lot of Hall of Fame type guys and a lot of good coaches. But he is the head of that beast. And if he's not there, it's a real problem, I think, for this team. And so, yeah, speedy recovery. It's just been an absolute disaster from the health perspective. The off-the-field stuff is totally getting to Colorado at some point. How about Cincinnati's coach, Scott Satterfield, who we've written off probably 3 or 4 times on this program, Mitch?
Yep.
Instead, he's moving along now and is kind of the talk of the Big 12 when it comes to teams who are on the rise.
It's a different team. We got different players. We have I think our recruiting staff did a great job of identifying guys that we needed to bring in. We did a great job of keeping the guys we needed to keep from the last 2 years that were on this team. And then I think our whole program's done a great job of kind of molding this team and getting this team to be a connected team. And in this day and age of portal and all the different moving parts that these teams have now, you want to have a veteran team. You want to have a team that's been scarred together like we have, and you want to have talent. So you want to have all that mixed in there. I think you can look at some of the plays today and some guys that were made today with guys we had before, but then also guys we brought in, Tyree Walker, Caleb Goody. I mean, these guys are making big time plays for us that go win games. So this is a different team, but also I saw Luke Kandra and DT and John Williams and stuff in the locker room. I'm proud of those guys too, because they helped us get to this point that we're at right now. I mean, it took all of us to get to where we are. To be able to go compete and win these last 2 games.
Big wins for Scott Satterfield and that Cincinnati program, who are clearly trending up and one of the hottest teams, not only in the Big 12, but I think in college football right now. On the opposite end is Kansas State. Chris Kleiman, he was asked about the struggles that he's experienced over the last 3 years in losing one-score games. They're 5-10 since this, 2023, since the Big 12 added new members. What do they need to do to win those games? This was Kleiman.
You got to make plays. That's the bottom line. It's in one-score games. You got opportunities to make plays, and when you make them, you end up winning those games. It's not one thing. It's a culmination of a lot of things, and it's not one player. It's offense, defense, and teams. And in this league, you're going to have a bunch of one-score games. That's just the way it is. And Last week's an indication that we didn't make those plays.
That's a guy who I've given a lot of credit to, and maybe I should stop. I mean, like, this is him and Lance Leipold were like Kansas State, man. Those guys are going to turn things around. Like, but when is it going to happen? You know what I mean? When are those guys going to prove themselves? When am I going to be like when Bill Snyder left Kansas State? We went, man, that guy turned around one of the worst programs in the history of college football and turned it into a team that you could always rely on from like a trenches standpoint, things like that. And look, Chris Kleiman has had success at Kansas State. They won the Big 12.
2022.
In 2022. They beat a TCU team who went to the national championship game. This is a program that should be performing better than they are. And they have the talent. And it just seems at that point, then you go, well, if you've got the talent and if the program has that background, then Chris Kleiman, maybe you're the issue here, and that's a real problem because then what do? You start looking around for a coach at Kansas State when you basically had the answer for the next 15 to 20 years with a guy like him. So they're reeling right now because I think that they're in a leadership issue. Speaking of leadership, a guy who is a bona fide leader and a guy who people love, and across the country, this guy's getting a lot of attention. He's going on national shows. BYU's head coach Kalani Sitake, after the game against West Virginia, had addressed the injured player situation and talked a little bit more about it because obviously those injuries are going to be huge to some big names on defense.
We'll see what happens with some guys that are banged up. Hopefully, can get back and ready to roll for us. But that's part of the game, you know. We have our depth there for a reason, and we spend a lot of time. As frustrating as last weekend, giving up that touchdown with some of the backup players that came in and played. Those are necessary reps to our guys to get them ready. Even though we gave up a drive and gave up some big plays, and I think it was 3 catches in a row. That's good for them to learn from. And those guys are, one play away from being on the field. So we did that exact same thing last year with a bunch of our guys, and now they're on the field and they actually finished the game. A good portion of them finished the game for us last weekend. So we'll see, what team we show up with this weekend. But I'm excited that some of the guys. I mean, what we're hearing, we'll find out more as we evaluate their health today. But I feel good about where we're going as a program and where we're going to be when we show up to Tucson.
Kalani's been quietly optimistic about some of these injured players coming out of that game against West Virginia. He was saying about Jack Kelly, who suffered an injury. They caused him to be in a sling on his left arm, feeling better about it than initially thought. I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then that commentary, but we will see more coming up on Wednesday night with that availability report. But Isaiah Glasgow and Jack Kelly are significant for BYU going forward. And Utah, BYU's rival, they'll face off next week, but they got to hold off until then. Kyle Whittingham, he is in this Utah program have struggled at home, and that was news to Kyle Whittingham when it was brought to his attention that they're 0-5 at Rice-Eccles in Big 12 games.
Kyle, in the last 2 years since entering the Big 12, you guys are 0-5 at Rice-Eccles Stadium. Does that put any emphasis going?
Say that again, the last 2 years.
Last 2 years, you guys are 0-5 in conference play at Rice-Eccles.
At Rice-Eccles? That sucks. I didn't know. I wasn't aware of that. I probably should have been, but okay.
Does that put any emphasis on this weekend's game?
Well, it hadn't. It might now, but I didn't realize that. Like I said, honestly, didn't go back. I mean, you lose and you're upset and you're mad. I guess you could delve into it further, but that's a trend we hope to break this week. How about that?
This is a guy who hates losing, but like when he heard that, and by the way, like,
do you think that was honestly news to him? He had to know. You really don't think he knew the trend?
You know why? Because it was an out-of-character moment for Coach Whittingham, and he doesn't have out-of-character moments. You know what I mean? Like, it was like a step away from, and it's not that he's, you might think to yourself, well, you should know that. Like, it was more like, hey, while you're in the middle of this thing, you don't think to yourself, what are we in the last 5 home games? You know what I mean? Like, you've just owned Rice-Eccles Stadium your entire career. It feels like that. It feels like that all the time. It feels like that every week. And then last year, you go, anyway, moving on. I want to forget all that noise. And then you have your first conference game, and you lose that one this year. Now, it's probably against the best team in the conference, But
and last year they lost to BYU and Iowa State, 2 11-win teams, and TCU, who was a 9-win team.
Right, and so, yeah, they had a lot of teams come in. And by the way, they got Arizona State coming in this weekend, who was an 11-win team last, or 12-win team last year.
Big 12 champ.
And Big 12 champs. Now, I don't know, though. Like, it's great news for Kyle Whittingham right now, because I do think that this Utah team is different. Not just because of Devin Dampier. I think the attitude is different. But Iowa State's going, who cares? We have been owned by this team. We've been owned by this team. But they beat them last year down in Tempe. They beat BYU down in Tempe. So they're all these teams who always kind of owned us in the last little while. We own these guys. You know what I mean? Like, when they were in the Pac-12 together, by the way, Utah and Arizona State, like, this was never a close game. And they know that. Arizona State knows that. They feel that. And they're like, we can feel this thing shifting, and we can, the onus is on Utah to prove it to Arizona State, not the other way around. And so that's a pretty fascinating thing. But I do think that Kyle Whittingham did not know, because of how he was like, wait, what? Okay, say that again. And in the way that he said it was almost like, I'm going to log this in my brain, and because he doesn't miss much. You know what I mean? And it's not that it's something that he should have known necessarily. It's more like it's a weird stat. But when you say it out loud, it's another weird stat. Going back to conference play in the Pac-12, their last season in the Pac-12, they're actually 5-11 in their last conference games between the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah, Utah's been struggling, especially in these big game spots, and this is another opportunity coming up with the Sun Devils, the defending Big 12 champs, rolling in to Salt Lake. Let's take a break. On the other side, we'll get to some of the rankings around college football and how many teams from the Big 12 could reach the college football playoff. We'll hit on that next. It's First and 12 on KSL News Radio.
Today's just the start of the Big 12 and Power 5 talk to come. Listen to JJ and Alex Monday on your drive home. Afternoons from 3 to 6 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, everybody, welcome on in. It is another edition of First and 12 right here on KSL News Radio. You can also download the podcast wherever podcasts are found. Take a listen, because Mitch, Harper, and myself dive in every week to the Big 12, and we jump into all things to get you kind of up to date of what's going on in a conference that needs to take a couple of leaps forward here, I think, this year. And if you are a person who watches the polls as closely as we do, Mitch, we know that this conference has some work to do. We wondered if whether or not, the AP polls and the coaches polls right now this time of year are interesting, because they're in that moment where you're in week 6, we're into week 7 now of college football. So you feel like you have a little bit of an idea. At least certainly a better idea than we did in week 1 and 2 when we were making bad guesses on the top 25. What a joke it was to think about Clemson being a number 1 or number 2 team, which is where I think 31 of the AP voters had them at least in the top 3. Clemson, okay, going into the season. And many of those had them at the number 1 spot because they still believed in Dabo Swinney. But how times changed. The rankings are so interesting because you have Texas Tech, who moved up into the top 10 finally. We felt like that was deserved. Cincinnati not being in the top 25 feels like a slight. But more importantly, I think it's the teams. You shouldn't be insulted by the teams in the Big 12 who aren't in the Big 12 or in the rankings, or high enough in the rankings, because I think BYU going up in 5 spots up to 18 this week, huge, was probably a correction from weeks prior to, right? Like, that's what we're looking at this point. They're probably where they should be, because that's where they should have been. They should have probably been 20 the week before, not 23. You see what I'm saying? But what happened? You had AP voters who go, I'll watch on a Friday. And what did they see, Mitch? They watched 2 quarters. You know what I mean? And BYU was up pretty big before that happened. Then they go, seen enough. And they hit the pillow, and it was actually probably better for BYU. They didn't see the second half.
And it's so true. And then it also is a case of Penn State and Texas falling out of the poll, and that forced everyone to almost go, well, who do I put in this top 10 to feel uncomfortable? And who do I put here at 18 with BYU? So that, was a seismic change to the poll. And I'm glad that the pollsters bounced Texas and Penn State from the rankings, because that needed to happen. But I think that the Big 12 still gets slept on a bit because Texas Tech, they deserve to be in the top 5. And I think, BYU, I'm fine with 18. I think you're right on that. But I think Arizona State, there's an argument for them to be, 15 range because their one loss is to a pretty solid Mississippi State team. And we've talked about Cincinnati. I think even Utah deserves to be ranked as well, along with Iowa State. I think that this league, I feel like there's this unspoken ceiling on the Big 12 teams where anything higher than 10, it gets really challenging for them to move into. Like, I was stunned that Texas Tech got into the single digits because it feels like there's just been, like I said, an unspoken cap where it's 10, and anything higher than that, it's almost untouchable for a Big 12 team to reach. And hopefully these teams can continue to climb because we're not far away from the college football playoff rankings coming up here in about a month. And once those things, come out, you want these teams to still be in a position where maybe they can, have a couple teams in the top 10 and really have a case to maybe have 2 teams from the Big 12 reach the playoff. Because right now, as we talked before the show, this is still probably going to be a league that's probably one bid.
Weirdly enough, the American has teams like Memphis, who are 6-0. They have teams that are
South Florida's 4-1.
South Florida's 4-1, and their one loss is to the number 2 team in the land.
Navy's undefeated. North Texas is undefeated. So it's the top heavy league right now.
Yeah, they'll probably get 3 bids. No, but I mean, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, those are the better that those teams do. It's good that Notre Dame took a couple of big losses early because they're going to have to do a lot of work to get. Now, don't get me wrong, the voters will try to figure out a way to get a Notre Dame team in over a second bid in the Big 12 if they can. But when you have teams that are doing well across other places, and by the way, group of 5 teams, ask yourself why group of 5 teams are doing better, Mitch. I don't know exactly, but it has to be that the transfer portal working the other direction helps teams like Memphis out, helps teams like North Texas out, helps teams. You can absolutely underestimate a team like that because you didn't think to yourself, oh, the talent that got cut or walked away from some of these big programs are now playing at these smaller schools with giant chips on their shoulder going throughout the rest of this thing. I mean, think in a different way. Jake Retzlaff going to Tulane, for example. That's a team who got immediately better out of the transfer portal, out of a situation where they were like, oh, we didn't think this was going to happen. Guys fall in their lap. Teams get better. Memphis is 6-0. And frankly, they should be ranked higher than number 25 because a Texas team being in the coaches poll at 18 or 19 or wherever they are, I think they're 19th in the coaches poll. They have no business being there. The projections still only have Texas Tech. The pundits have Texas Tech as the only Big 12 team, and most of them have them as the 5th, the number 1, just outside of the top 4. They never have them in the top 4. They won't have them in the top 4. Why? Because they want to put Miami, they want to put 2 Big 10, they want to put Oregon and Ohio State. They have to put an SEC champion in there, and then they go, fine. Anyway, no room for the Big 12 in here.
Yeah, it's difficult, and I think for Texas Tech too, if they have one slip up, we know what happens. They will get faded quick, and that's just what happens. It was, again, positive to see Iowa State hold on, but they still dropped 8 spots to lose to a team that's worthy of being in the top 25 and just barely outside the poll at number 26 if the rankings extended that far. So that's what's challenging for the Big 12 teams is that you lose a game, well, you're then exposed, and whereas these other leagues, well, that's a quality loss. Why does no one in the Big 12 get the benefit of a quality loss? And I think that's one of the frustrating things about trying for these teams to try to navigate this conference because perfection is so challenging. Maybe Texas Tech can do it, but the odds are against them. So I'll be curious to see how this all progresses, but it is trending towards another season where it's probably a one-bid league unless we see Texas Tech and maybe BYU could both be undefeated in Arlington. Maybe that's the scenario where you can guarantee 2 playoff teams. But the idea of BYU with its gauntlet coming up, being undefeated, that seems like a tall task. So just life in the Big 12, you could say.
Let's take another break. Our first hour's in the books. We've got a second one right around the corner. We've got tons to talk about. We have the games that are on the slate for this week in the Big 12, the ones that are going to be, and I know we're probably going to guess all of them right. All the ones just like the Cincinnati-Iowa State games from last week. And we've got our predictions. We've got the slate of games. We've also got our power poll that we're going to probably fight over. So stay right here with us. It's First and 12 right here on KSL News Radio.